Good morning, ladies and gents. Welcome to the first Office of the Prime Minister press briefing. My role this morning is rather small. We've come far away from the Linden Pinling headquarters to OPM. I've seen a few familiar faces. But I'm here simply this morning to extend our highest congratulations to the appointed Press Secretary, Mr. Watson. I've had the distinguished opportunity to know him personally as a friend and as a colleague. I think that we all understand the full weight of the responsibility that the members of the press have on behalf of the Bahamian people. We know and we respect what you do, and I will assure you that as the Director of Communication at OPM, that I will do my part in ensuring that you are able to do your job. Insofar as speaking about my colleague, he's a distinguished veteran. Mr. Watson has built himself the credibility over the past 20 years. Whilst this may be a new territory to Mr. Watson, I can assure you that he approached this job with a sense of integrity and diligence. He understands full well what the media expects as his colleagues and serving the time. I reiterate again that I am proud to work along with Mr. Watson over the next 5 years, and most certainly I know that he will make the Bahamian people proud. We understand the expectations of the Bahamian people and those in the media. And so I will hand this over to Tiska Pratt, or I'll go directly to Clint. Well, I'll hand it over to Mr. Watson, the Press Secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister.
Good morning. Thank you, Latre, for those kind words and confidence in what it is that we want to do here. And good morning, colleagues, and welcome to our first briefing, which we hope will be an exciting times for you over the next few months and years that we have to dialogue. It's exciting being on this side of the microphone and not asking the questions, but answering the questions. And so I'm eager to do that for you and to get the information that you need in order to inform our public, inform Bahamians throughout the length and breadth of this country on what the Davis administration is doing, how we are functioning, how we are getting it done, how we are accomplishing it. And so it's good to have all of you here. Breathe, because y'all seem tense. Y'all breathe, y'all breathe. We're gonna have a good time doing what it is that we do, because we understand how important these events are, not just to your job, but to the Bahamian people. So before we get into a lot of the meat of the things, I wanna lay the premise of why we're talking and why we're here today. Upon taking office, the Davis administration began working to address three distinct crises that are impacting the nation. We're combating a public health crisis with the COVID-19 pandemic that has strained public health resources, as you're all quite aware. We're facing an economic crisis brought on by the pandemic and Hurricane Dorian, which we're still dealing with. And finally, we have to solve a crisis in government brought on by prior administration's lack of transparency, poor fiscal management, and blatant disrespect towards the Bahamian people. The Davis administration understands the monumental task ahead of it and has wasted no time delivering on its promises of a new day for the Bahamas. Within the promise is a mandate to address the pressing needs of the country in the short term while building out and executing a vision for long-term prosperity. So you already see we're dealing with two things, right now and the future as well. This includes taking immediate action to win the fight against COVID-19. As you've seen, you've spoken to our Minister of Health and Wellness, bringing widespread change to key government operations and policies to bring transparency, competency, and respect back to government, and creating an economy that works for everyone, not just a select few. I want you to remember that because it's important. Sometimes we think it's all about just the group that we see in front of us, not recognizing there are so many more who are impacted by our decisions. And you'll see our decisions reflect that, not just a select, but indeed the widespread people who may have not even been talked about before. We're building policies for them as well. This administration began working from day one believe it or not, to bring about these much-needed changes. We promised to bring about free testing for COVID-19, and we're now rolling out a pilot in the Family Islands today that will eventually be expanded nationally. We talked about it, now we're doing it. We pledged to consult widely with medical professionals to bring about improvements to the government's COVID-19 response, and of course, we've done that. Talk to them, they'll tell you that. We promised to adjust protocols based on the science, removing any non-science-based restrictions, and we have delivered on that promise with a new curfew and new rules allowing previously restricted businesses to re-engage their staff and conduct business safely. Talk to the business owners. They're kind of happy today because they're now able to do business. We promise to be more accessible to the media and commit to a constant dialogue with the public. We are delivering on that promise through increased two-way communications and public engagement. The Davis administration is just getting started. Don't think by a long shot that we're done or we're out of air. We're just getting started. The immediate priority is now on areas of focus that will have the greatest impact to the Bahamian people. First area of focus is the effective management, as we said, of COVID-19 pandemic through the introduction, free testing, we talked about it, provision of medical masks, which is very important, expansion of contact tracing capacity, and enforcement of protocols. These initiatives have proven that if enforced, they actually work. The first area of focus, of course, we talked about COVID-19. The second area of focus is the strengthening of healthcare facilities nationwide. COVID-19 has merely exposed the long-running institutional flaws, capacity issues, and resource challenges that were impacting our healthcare system even before the pandemic. We have aggressively set in motion plans to build new healthcare facilities, you hear more about it, strengthening existing facilities, and provide resources to our healthcare workers. The third area of focus, of course, is stabilizing the economy. This will be done through fiscal responsibility strategies and effective debt management while addressing infrastructural needs, diversifying the economy through renewed national investment strategies, completing the government's digital transformation, very important, and investing in Bahamian businesses, especially in the orange, blue, and green economies. Fourth area of focus is immediate relief brought on by a VAT decrease and a pension increase, bringing greater savings to the average Bahamian and more money in the pockets of pensioners for what will be the first major pension increase in years. Everybody wants more money in their pocket. We're going to work to make sure that actually happens. Fifth area of focus is leadership on climate change initiatives. As an investment in our future, as the Bahamas works with global partners to address the greatest existential threat to our existence. And you're going to hear more about that today. That's important to us. When you understand climate change and the impact that it's having on the Bahamas, you'll understand that this is not just a mandate. This is a requirement. It's something that has to be done right away to preserve our country for future generations and generations to come. Regarding the government's legislative agenda, the Davis administration expects to bring 3 critical pieces of legislation before Parliament prior to the end of this year. 3 bills include the proposed VAT legislation to facilitate a decrease from 12 to 10%, the pension increase, a merchant shipping bill in keeping with the Blue Economy mandate. The purpose of the legislation is to bring much-needed relief for the Bahamian people and set the foundation for economic recovery. While working towards its substantive legislative agenda and policy priorities, the government will be completing board appointments for all 140 boards by next week, Wednesday. Cabinet has been very active and busy going through that work. The government has also given a 90-day notice to overseas appointees to allow sufficient time for the winding up of ongoing affairs as a gesture of good faith in the interest of political maturity and government continuity. Stress that again, because sometimes we feel as if when a party comes into power, okay, everybody leave, go. No, the Prime Minister Davis has made it intentionally his mandate to allow there to be a smooth transition, allow persons who are in office to continue working as they wind up their affairs so the business of the Bahamas internationally can continue and be transitioned smoothly. Just over a month in office, the Davis administration has made significant progress on delivering as promised for the Bahamian people. I know it seems like a lifetime. Hey, it's been 1 month, 30 days. We've been busy. This brief is the first of many as the government continues to demonstrate unprecedented transparency with the media and the general public. As the government executes its blueprint for change, you can expect further details to be released as soon as they are available. So we thought it was important to give you that, to help you understand what we've been doing. We've not just been setting up shop and trying to see how comfortable the chairs are. We've been on the ground working. We've been trying to quickly address the issues as they come and allow the people to feel, not see governance, to feel good governance. And that's what indeed our mandate has been. Okay? So, in brief, here are some important takeaway points I want you to ensure that you underscore. All right? There are 5 things we're focusing on: addressing COVID-19 effectively, and of course, free testing, providing medical masks, updating contact tracing, enforcement of protocols. Those are all happening right now, spearheaded by the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Darville. Strengthening healthcare facilities nationwide. That's happening. We're looking at what are the issues now in healthcare facilities. What can we do right away to bring some relief? And of course, dealing with the persons who work in these institutions. What can we do to make their job a little bit easier so that we begin to strengthen an institution that was collapsing? Stabilizing the economy, that's important. All of us want to live in a country where the economy is not only strong, but begins to grow. So we're doing that simultaneously while dealing with the health sector. Bringing immediate relief with VAT reduction. You will see when Parliament reconvenes, these are immediate bills that you will see. And of course, focusing on climate change because it is a real thing. We talked about the legislation that are going to be going to Parliament before the end of the year. The VAT legislation to facilitate the decrease. Pension increase. This is to ensure pensioners get a much-needed increase after receiving the same amount for years. The merchant shipping bill in keeping with the blue economy mandate. Now, you can probably figure it out. If you look and see what we're doing and taking to Parliament, these are indeed bills that impact people. The majority of the people, Bahamians who have been seeking for relief. This is our priority, and that's why you see it happening first. Board selections, we've told you the Cabinet is wrapping up this process, and so we'll be able to announce by next week the many boards across the country will assist in good governance and ensuring that the mandate of the Davis administration is carried out. Talked about ambassadors and overseas appointments. They have a 90-day period to wind up affairs and to continue working, and that's important to show continuity in government. COVID-19 fight. We want to encourage people that even as we put measures in place with the COVID-19 fight, it is important for them, particularly with the Delta wave, when you feel sick or you feel ill, even though sometimes you may be asymptomatic, not to just think that, okay, I'm fine. Because what we've been finding out, particularly in the family of islands, is people stay home and they wait until it gets absolutely bad before they go to a doctor, before they are airlifted to a hospital for fear of what may happen at these facilities. And by that time, when they do go and they do respond, it's too late. And we know what happens. Many of them die. And we've seen that happening. And that's what's going on some of our family islands. So it's important to educate them, to help them understand how this illness works, how this virus works. And sometimes with the Delta strain, you can think you're okay, and it sneaks up on you. And when it does sneak up on you, you're already in a late stage. So it's important to help our people understand this so they themselves can build up the right defense in dealing with the COVID-19. It is a partnership. Of course, some interesting things we want to announce as well is that we are indeed looking at things that the Bahamian people have asked. The former Prime Minister in office commissioned an investigation into Bahamas Power and Light, the board, the initial board that was in office led by then Chairman Donald Osborne. We've not heard from that report. We can confirm today that a report was done by a foreign company. The name of that company we're going to release to you as well, and I think you may be happy to know that we do have this report in hand. It is a very interesting read, and of course it's now been sent to the Minister responsible for BPL, the Minister of Works, the Honorable Alfred Sayers, for his review on it. It's interesting. You want to read this, and it may share a very clear picture as to why we never heard about this report, which was presented in November of last year to the government. Interesting there. It explains a lot. I'll say it and leave it as that. You know I'm a good teaser. I know how to do it. I'll leave it at that for you. It's important for us to understand as well that we want to be transparent in all that we do. I'm happy for this opportunity to be before you. Our Prime Minister, as you may be aware, is in Washington, D.C. today along with his wife. He's attending a 10th anniversary commemoration, the Martin Luther King Memorial. And you know there are ties to the Bahamas, Martin Luther King. Some of his most famous speeches were written on our shores. And so we are pleased that he was invited. President Biden is addressing that forum tomorrow. And so Prime Minister is there, and we look forward to hear great reports from that. The committee who has organized that comprises of Lionel Richie, Shelley Arbuquet, and Tommy Hilfiger. And so we are indeed excited for the exchange there. We've sent something very native to our land as gifts on behalf of the Bahamian people. So we'll be reporting to you on that pretty soon. All right, so having said that, I want to be able to bring in the minister responsible for housing and transport and housing, the Honorable JoBeth Colby-Davis here, because many of you have been asking about the initiative that was started in the previous administration for the Prospect Ridge Housing Program. She's going to give you an update on that, as well as talk about some immediate relief for housing for our Bahamian people. And so I'm going to allow her to do that, and then we'll let you give her questions on those statements that she will make, and then you'll meet someone from the Department of Environment. I'll introduce her in a second to talk about this climate change initiative that we are fully engaged in and dealing with. So without further ado, and then we'll come back and take questions from you concerning anything in government. I'll invite the minister to come now and just speak to you briefly on the housing initiative. Minister Colby-Davis.
Thank you. Let me just put this flat. This part. Yes, I'm quite petite. Thank you, Press Secretary Clint Watson, and I want to say congratulations to you as well on your role, and I'm sure you will serve well. Good morning. Briefly, I wanted to provide you with information related to the housing program at the Ministry of Housing and where we are and how we are presently positioned. So our first priority was to look at how we can assist the persons in Abaco, because we understand that they suffered a great loss 2 years ago, and there's a great need for us to do some work down there. So in Abaco, we are ready to begin the tender process for the construction of the road for a 21-lot subdivision in Spring City. The tender document has been drafted, and as soon as the final approval is given, we will move forward in getting the 3 bids for the road works. And it is expected that this process will take us about 4 to 5 weeks. Fortunately, we have the price from the Water Corporation for installation of water lines, and they do not have to go out for bids on that. However, because of the workload that BPL presently have in Abaco for the work that they're doing, they have requested that we go out to the private sector for electrical work tendering. So this will be done the same time simultaneously with the roadworks that we'll be commissioning. There are other sites that we are working on in Abaco, and I've spoken to MP Pinder and also the MP Cornish down there for work and how they want us to assist other areas. But at this time, we are working harder to complete the Spring City first, or at least put the contractors in place before we move on to Central Pines and Sands Cove 2, which will be very shortly. As it relates to the very popular Prospect Ridge project, we have had a number of meetings related to this project with my technical team, and they also went out to do a site visit for me to determine where we are and how we could respond to the demands that presently exist and all of the applications that we presently have. Unfortunately, there's a lot of groundwork that must be done that has yet to be started as it pertains to that project, work related to a master plan. I've spoken to the company that was previously engaged by the former administration, and absolutely nothing has been done yet. In fact, they got a letter advising them that they were awarded this project probably about 2 or 3 days before the election. So nothing has been done in terms of creating a master plan to do the work at Prospect Ridge to begin to draw out how it will actually look. There's been no feasibility study and no topography study to actually provide us with the lay of the land, what lumps and bumps presently exist, and how we would have to fill it in. And so we are not in a position yet to determine the infrastructural cost. We think it will be great, but that is yet to be determined because we'll get all that information from the feasibility and the topography study. And so we have a lot of groundwork to do, and we want to do it right. My technical team is building itself up so that we can provide the right information to Cabinet and to the Bahamian public, so we're able to produce, if we can actually go forward with the project, which we are hoping and we're confident that we'll be able to do this development, but it may not be in the time that originally was provided, because we want to be sure that these studies are completed and we have enough information to determine costs and timing for the Bahamian public. So no actual progress. We're beginning to get bids in to get those studies completed. As it pertains to the Carmichael Village subdivision, I'm happy to tell you that I've already toured the Carmichael Village subdivision site with my technical team, and we are very optimistic that we can get this project back on track and in a very short time begin constructing homes. We're actually excited, and in the next week, my technical team will be meeting with various contractors so that we can determine where we are and how we're placed with Carmichael Village and the timeline of us getting started with some construction, because we've had a lot of infrastructural work there. We've looked at the road height, and we understand that there will be additional costs as relates to foundation in filling in. We have to fill in a lot of areas on the Carmichael site, but we have engineers who are in the process of working out the cost for us, and very shortly, you'll see homes going up in the subdivision of Carmichael. We are also looking at other areas that belongs to the Ministry of Housing. We have smaller plots of land that we can possibly start doing constructing homes on. So we'll determine where they are and how we can start getting some homes done. And then obviously there'll be some renovations carried out on some of the properties that presently exist in our rental units. So that is where we are right now for housing. Any questions?
Francesca Brown from Eyewitness News.
Hi, Francesca.
You indicated that, after the studies are done and there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in place, does that mean that the cost that the previous administration promised the Bahamian people, that it may be higher than what they initially expected when they applied for these lots?
Well, my technical team, we're still trying to figure out where that cost came from, because nothing has actually been done. And so I don't know if that was really a realistic picture of what the cost would look like. And so I would say at the moment, we cannot commit to what was previously announced. I want to have all the information with me so that when I do tell the Bahamian public and those who've applied what the actual cost is, I'm confident that we can give them that price.
Kyle Walking.
Hi, Kyle.
You mentioned that nothing has been done, so just frankly speaking, do you think this was just used as a campaign tool by the administration?
Well, what I will say is the fact that you have a billboard that has a photo, but you have no master plan. One wants to know where that photo came from. So did they grab it off of Google? I don't know. But we have no master plan, which will actually provide you with the completed look of the subdivision. And the fact that that doesn't exist means I don't understand where the numbers came from for the land costs and where the pictures came from.
And what about the selection process for those individuals who would have applied for the Prospect Ridge project? How is that process going? Is it complete?
What I will say is we have a number of applications in for Prospect Ridge. We have a number of applications in for Carmichael. In order for us to actually begin calling persons back and advising them that they have been approved, we need to know clearly what the project costs will be, because they would have been providing letters from the bank that gave them pre-approval amounts that they can actually get a mortgage for. And in order to determine if they would fit into the category of that subdivision, we have to determine our actual costs. And so I wouldn't say anyone is out of luck in terms of being a part of that project. What my priority is to make sure that I help as many Bahamians as I can to become homeowners, but I want to make sure I do it in the right way. So I want to provide the Bahamian public with a number of options. If you're unable to go into the Prospect Ridge because of the cost, and you may not be approved for that, I still want to offer you an option that is probably Carmichael or another subdivision. So I want to be able to give options so persons don't feel like all hope is lost.
Follow-up question. When the Davis administration came into the office, it was mentioned that this government will go back to building homes. And so as it relates to, I guess, both the Carmichael and the Prospect Ridge project, is it the intentions of the government to take away that responsibility for individuals? Because we know there was a setup for individuals to actually build the homes themselves, specifically with Prospect Ridge.
Yeah, we are going to be restructuring the policy and how we present all of our subdivisions, because I think it'll be easier for us to help to get a better cost to Bahamian public if we actually provide the homes turnkey. And so that's the initiative that I'll be working towards.
Yes. Hi, Rashad Rule from the Tribune.
Hi, Rashad.
Yeah, I think one of the things the former administration would say is that in order to provide affordable housing, what they wanted to do is, regardless of how much the Prospect Ridge project would cost, they were willing to absorb a lot of that cost just to keep the pricing for the people who applied to a reasonable degree. So are you able to say that flat out the government, the Davis administration, is not committing to absorbing
No.
the amount of cost?
The purpose of an affordable housing program run by the government is to be able to allow a certain particular category of persons that wouldn't generally be approved to become homeowners, to be able to become homeowners. So at the front of our administration, the priority is to make sure we allow for more Bahamians to become homeowners. However, I cannot work blindly. I must be able to say what costs the Davis administration will be absorbing when I go and present my case to the cabinet. And so in order for me to say that and confidently, I have to be able to be provided the information. And that's why I need to get all of the groundwork done. But we will ensure that we provide affordable housing to the Bahamian public. That's the priority. It may not be on the same level in certain areas because it depends on how the lay of the land works. But the overall purpose is for us to provide affordable housing.
Is there a timeline for when all of the studies and everything that can be done, so you will actually be able to know whether or not that land is even feasible for houses to be built on? So people who did apply can know whether they should be searching for something else or?
So the same timeline while we're in trying to get everything up to and ready to go in Abaco, we'll be working along that same time. We're trying to get the studies in before the new year, before the end of the year, so we can get, I don't know how long it will take them. So I have to actually find out how long it will take those who we contract to do. But I would hope for at least 6 to 8 weeks we get some answers back and be able to advise the public of where we are.
Given your revelation just now, you understand that there will be a lot who are looking forward to this who are now losing confidence.
Well, I don't want anyone to lose confidence. Let me say that. I don't want anyone to lose confidence, but I want them to know that when I provide information to them, it's correct. And I've done my research, and the amount that I give them will be a sure amount that they can become homeowners. And so I will say to the Bahamian public, I am working for them. I am working to do this right, and I'm working to provide them with the avenue that they become homeowners. And so don't lose confidence. It just may be a little bit more time added, but don't lose confidence. And I am not out to turn down persons or applications. And it matters not to me who they are. I want to make sure that Bahamians are provided with the correct information.
Has the government put aside a total figure as to what the housing program in its totality would cost?
Sorry?
Has the government put aside, have you set aside a figure as yet for the housing, for either subdivisions or whatever? Have
You
set
mean
aside-
minimum or maximum per house?
Have you set aside?
per home?
Even in its totality, have you set aside a concrete figure, a total figure?
No, we haven't said, I don't know, I'm not sure if I understand the question. We know a certain amount we don't want the houses to go over in terms of affordable housing programs.
Okay, say, $5 million
The
set
budget
aside
for
for a
housing.
certain amount of housing.
Oh, the budget will differ depending on the area. So we don't have a specific figure in terms of the Prospect Ridge and the Carmichael. It's going to differ.
Okay, I was just looking for a total figure overall.
For the budget? Well, no, we haven't gotten to that point yet. But we know how much we want the houses to cost, and we want it to be affordable. Okay?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update, and hopefully that gives you more understanding on what is actually happening in housing. And Carla, to even build on what the Minister has said, what the Prime Minister is doing now is there's a reassessment of the budget because a lot of what's in the budget they've still not been able to justify or explain. So the Prime Minister is expecting to present in Parliament a revised budget as to where the allocations are, where money will be spent towards. So we'll wait to hear his announcement in Parliament regarding that. But there is going to be a reallocation of the budget, according to Prime Minister Davis. All right, I want to bring to you now, we talked about the importance of climate change and what's happening globally. You've seen what's happening globally. All eyes are on the Bahamas because of the impact of Hurricane Dorian. There is no scientific explanation as to what the Bahamas faced. And so this presents a prime opportunity for us to share our stories with the world and to be able to take action. Not just have people feel sorry for us, not just have NGOs that come in and temporarily assist us, but to get some immediate long-term relief and to be able to make some policy changes that will help the Bahamian people to live for a longer period of time. Coming to just explain about the upcoming COP26 conference. As you know, it's a worldwide conference where nations all over the world and leaders all over the world will be in attendance. This is a great opportunity for the Bahamas, and Dr. Rochelle Newbold is the director of the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection in the Ministry of Environment. I'm going to invite her just to come and briefly share the importance of the Bahamas being at the table for this upcoming event. Dr. Newbold.
Thank you, Clint. Short people. Well, I know when we start talking about things involving the United Nations and the Bahamas traveling, Bahamians, it raises a level of concern among Bahamians as to, well, why are you going to go in? Why are we spending that money? What benefit does it come back to the country? But from 1992, the Bahamas saw the significance of being a part of what is called the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. Knowing even far back as then that the planet itself was changing. And in order to understand that change and to be at the table when decisions were going to be made regarding that change, we had to be there. Our most recent affirmation of our commitments to that has been our signing on to the 2015 Paris Agreement. And that would have been when we would have had all that global discussions about the 1.5 degrees. And if the world temperature goes up, what's going to happen to island nations like ourselves? So when people raise concerns about why we travel, it's important that we do travel so that we could be in the room and understanding what the conversation is rather than outside of the room and being told what the conversation is. So in November of this year, like Mr. Watson said, numerous countries, 134 countries will be in Scotland to determine, one, are we on track with this 1.5 degrees? Is there going to be a commitment to changing what we see going on in the planet, on the planet? The fires in California, the melting of the glaciers, the issue of Dorian. Is Dorian a phenomenon that's one-off, or will it be a repeat occurrence? And right now, everybody feels it will be a repeat occurrence. Our whole issue with respect to these commitments that we have made is that the Bahamas, as well as other countries, are supposed to provide reports that give everybody an understanding as to whether or not we're meeting the mark, or whether or not we need to accelerate the aspirations, or whether or not we're all going to die, right? And even if the Bahamas does 100% what it agreed to do, will that affect the change? We are but a drop in the bucket, right? There are larger nations, bigger populations, larger industries that are contributing to the greenhouse greenhouse gas issue that we therefore inherit by the impacts that are experienced among us. So why are we going to go to COP? We have to go to COP because we have to be at the table when we're negotiating the issues of loss and damage. Countries that are creating the situation have to be held responsible for the damage that is being done by countries that are on the receiving end. If we are not there to have our voices heard, to make demands, to put the questions to the point, then who will do it? It is important for us to be there because there are financial allocations that are given to countries around the globe, particularly small island developing states such as ours, and we need to be there to ensure that the Bahamas doesn't lose its allocation, that the Bahamas can say, hey, we actually need more than you thought because we are now experiencing X, Y, and Z, and that has put us back a significant way, and we need your assistance. We need you to up your donations, your funding allocations to us so that we can address this damage that we suffered because of what other countries may be doing in terms of their rising greenhouse gases. And then we also have to be there because we need to have the voices of the Bahamian people heard around the world. When Dorian happened, we got the spotlight. Everybody was here. Everybody wanted to help us. And now we're moving away from that, and some other things have now taken the spotlight, but that residual, the damage, the mental health state of our country and the people, these things still exist. The unemployment, the loss of infrastructure, the cost to rebuild, they still exist. And we as a country, a very small country, we have to figure out and determine how we are going to address that. Now, the problem for us in part is that people look at the Bahamas and they say, you're too rich. You have all these hotels, you drive these fancy cars, we do all the things that we do. And there is a misunderstanding about these sorts of things. And because there's this perception that we are rich sometimes, that conversation about whether the Bahamas needs money gets skewed in the wrong direction, because we do need money. The next hurricane can totally wipe out this country. We could be up here today, and by the end of the hurricane season, we'll be down there. That is not rich. We don't have that level of economic resilience because our major industry is tourism. When we lose our water because of sea level rise, or we lose our agricultural land, even though we're importing and we're trying to move away from that high level of imports, there won't be anything that we can do to help ourselves. So we have to be at the table. We have to ask the questions. We have to demand what is rightfully ours as members of this planet. And then we also need to look at how we can use these opportunities that are presented during the COP, such as this whole issue of carbon credits. I mean, we have the crypto coins as a new industry for money marketing. Now we have carbon credits as a new environmental economic factor. So we have to explore whether or not we have the largest coastal sea area in this region. If we put all the other Caribbean countries together, they won't compare to ours. But we have the opportunity to use our seagrasses and to use our corals and to use our mangroves as currency, which leads me to the point about Bahamians understanding the need to stop destroying our environment. We need to understand and appreciate that our environment works in tandem with us for protection, for the benefit. The environment is our economy. When you ask people about the Bahamas, they talk about our crystal clear waters, they talk about our white sandy beaches. That's what they reverberate with when they think about the Bahamas. But if we seek to destroy that, then we will have nothing. So it is important for us to be there. It's financially important, it's socially important, and it's important for us as members of this planet to make sure that we are part of that global discussions. And in doing that, we also bring back benefits such as projects that support, last year when we went to COP25, our healthcare facilities, trying to help the medical facilities at Princess Margaret and all the clinics come up with a proper system whereby we can track diseases, we can track their occurrences, we can be able to identify where hotspots are occurring within country. And that's a program that we're implementing now, and we're hopeful in the next 18 months that that will be something that can actually be active and effective in helping the medical health individuals monitor and track what's going on for climate-related diseases. But ladies and gentlemen, If you are not a part of the international discussion, you do not exist on this planet. So we have to be very strategic. I agree, where we go, how we go, who is going to be negotiating and on our part, but we have to be there in order to have a voice. Without a voice, you have no purpose. Questions?
I didn't have a question, but I think it would be a question better suited for the press secretary. Oh, well, I mean, I can hold it until until your questions are done, but it's a question that would be better. It has to do with the same issue, but I think it would be better suited for him to respond.
Sure.
I have a question. Chester Robles, National Guardian Business. What arguments are we taking besides Hurricane Dorian to COP 26 to show them that we have a problem and we're in need of the excess funding? We've gotten funding from the IDB to do some stuff, coastal stuff. I think. Where are we with that as well?
So you're taking your example. We didn't get a grant from the IDB. We got a loan from the IDB. So just like when you get a loan from the bank, that comes with interest. That interest is what we have to absorb. We're going to COP to say, let's talk about this Warsaw mechanism for loss and damage. We suffered a damage because of a climate change event. That event was not a product of our own doing. That event, as we all through the global scientific knowledge knows, that it was because we have certain consumer countries that exude a lot of greenhouse gases and they're contributing to this change in the global environment. Who should rightfully pay in the event of such a damage? If we're not there to ask that question and to negotiate that change, we will always be, it's damage, it's your country, you pay.
Have we decided how much money we need, maybe on an annual basis, to cover?
Those types of negotiations aren't singular to one country, because what happens to the Bahamas happens to Jamaica and to Trinidad. So as a CARICOM, as a G77 group, we negotiate as countries, right? And all of the developing countries get together to have that discussion. The Pacific Islanders, the Caribbean, Latin America, South America, we all have to go together because the G7, they are a different group of people. So it's these bilateral discussions that we have. We all agree that this is the one planet that we have and we all have to live here together. But we don't necessarily all agree on how that process really works, right? And it's those nuances that we have to work out in the details during those meetings.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay, and I think it's important also to say that this has required a lot of work at the last minute because the previous administration did not make any plans for COP26 or to attend. And so immediately in assuming office, we had to begin working on this initiative because we recognize the potential of attending, and we recognize what we could possibly gain having a seat at the table. And so this was very important for us. And so at the last minute, we've had some of our great technical expertise, experts here at the Office of Prime Minister, particularly Mr. Ian Poitier, who's been working specifically with trying to ensure that we are ready, that we're prepared. The Ministry of Environment, Dr. Newell and her team have been busy working, preparing on reports, applying to the various councils that we need to be a part of to have a seat at the table, to be able to qualify and to perhaps come away with some much needed funds to be able to put some things in place here in the Bahamas. So we're excited about that. Yes, Sloan.
Sloan Smith, Eyewitness News. You mentioned, both of you would have mentioned this administration's focus on climate change, especially with the upcoming COP26. Are you able to speak to the government's current position on oil drilling, especially given the fact that in opposition, the Prime Minister would have said that he did or does support friendly oil drilling, and in that, is it the intention of the Davis administration to review the BPC agreement, to move forward with it, to release the details of the agreement, and also whether to renegotiate it?
I'm glad you asked that because what you would have heard Dr. Newell talk about is the importance of us not only going there and saying, here's where we are, we're vulnerable as a nation, but also what we're doing to protect our own environments. And what Prime Minister Davis has been doing is engaging the Ministry of Environment, experts like Dr. Newell, to talk about where are we, what is required for us internationally, globally. If we do this, what will be the result of it? So what we're doing right now is he's simply talking to the experts, getting the best analysis, getting the best advice, and based on that, he will formulate a policy that will, of course, come before Parliament. It will go to Cabinet, and of course, you'll hear about it. But what he's doing right now is talking to the experts in the field, finding out what is best for the Bahamas. If we do this, how do we do it in a parameter that's safe? If we do this, will it have significant benefits to the people of the Bahamas, not just to the people who are doing it, but to the people who live here, who own the resources, the Bahamian people. So we're presently engaged in analysis right now to determine what is the best course of action to move forward. And you'll hear about that very soon.
So will his position in opposition on oil drilling be the same position now that he's in government?
He's talking to the experts, understanding that when you have a position in opposition, it's important to determine when you are now in government, whether or not it is advisable, whether or not it is beneficial, and then determine the course of action of our government. And that's what we want to say right at this point. He is presently engaging the experts, and he will make a determination as to whether or not his policy will remain or whether, based on the analysis, he will change it. And we will give that to you. All right? I want to take questions and answers on other issues that you may have. I promised you all that we would be here for 1 hour, and so we have about 14 minutes left. So let's get some other questions from you. I want to begin with Leah Cooper from JCN. Leah.
Hi, could you address considering the traffic jam, I guess, at the Port of Los Angeles, could you address concerns of a possible food and supply shortage?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because obviously that's a concern of many nations. And of course, you know that the Bahamas, we import just about everything that we consume. And by the way, on the side note, that's why the Minister of Agriculture is so adamant about getting more food production locally so that we don't have to depend on it. But until that happens, we recognize that there is a shortage, there is a bottleneck as far as what's happening. We see what's going on, but what we're delighted about is the U.S. President has announced some solutions in mitigating that bottleneck and dealing with it. We're excited about that because a lot of what we get comes from the United States, and so we believe that we will be able to have some relaxation on that. You've seen that food stores have pushed back their increase to next year, and that's primarily because they see that for the immediate future until the end of the year, we'll still be able to get the supply that we need at the cost that it's not marginally higher. We do know that it will increase because of what's going on globally. But for now, we're excited that there is some relief coming. The United States has announced some relief, and so we believe we'll be okay for the next few months. All right, any other question you have?
I was going to ask, in light of that, is there any concern that it will affect recovery efforts on alcohol around the world?
We don't think so. Recovery efforts are not only continuing, but we're looking at new ways to be able to do what we do faster than what we do. And we know, of course, that there is some concerns about supplies that come from China. A lot of the supplies that are being sourced aren't coming from there. So we believe it'll still be able to continue. While we do see that perhaps long term there may be some significant challenges, but we have some space and time to try and make some alternative arrangements in the meantime. Okay. Let's take Carla Palmer, ZNS.
What has been the government's communication with Haitian authorities with respect to this ongoing illegal migration situation?
The Minister of Immigration, he's expected to make a statement next week. I spoke to him on, Tuesday, regarding the issue. There has been some dialogue. As you can imagine right now, Haiti is very unstable. The government is having its own challenges. And so, of course, United Nations has expressed the need and the concern to first bring stability to the government of Haiti first, and then by in turn, the people of Haiti. And so you can imagine getting communications at that level is still challenging. However, Ministry of Foreign Affairs are trying to have some bilateral talks to be able to address the issues. For the time being, though, a lot of our channeling and discussions has been through the agencies of the United Nations because they're on the ground and they're talking to them. So a lot of our talk has been with them, but that, of course, is on the agenda to have direct talks with the government once there is some level of stability to try and form a better partnership and find some solution to what's happening right now. But of course, because of the instability, it remains very difficult to have those talks on a greater level. All right? Sure.
So many countries now are making vaccinations mandatory to either keep your job or enter a country like the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
is the government still maintaining its position here that it's a personal choice?
It is. The government it still stands in that. And I'm glad you raised that point because you notice that there are so many countries around the world that are now beginning to put mandatory vaccination in place. I mean, our own neighbors to the north, the United States, is doing it. The Bahamas still maintains its position. But as you can see from those companies that have bases around the world, it's becoming increasingly difficult to ward them off and say, listen, we cannot impose because of the government's position in the Bahamas. And that's why you see other measures such as paying for your own test, because it's trying to encourage the people to get vaccinated. And perhaps if they have to pay for it, maybe they'll get vaccinated. But it's becoming the trend globally. But our position maintains the same, but we're encouraging Bahamians to seriously evaluate. When you talk to some Bahamians who've recently got vaccinated, right? And I think it's so interesting to mention because people were adamant, I'm not going to do the vaccination thing. We don't think the vaccination thing is wise. And then when they saw the United States put that policy in place that if you want to come to the United States, you got to be vaccinated, you can't get a spot right now for vaccinations because people want to be able to travel freely to the United States, particularly during the upcoming season. So I think Bahamians really have to sit down and evaluate the importance and make a decision based on their needs and assessment. We know there's some Bahamians for health risk and health reasons that can't, but I encourage all Bahamians to evaluate it seriously, particularly going forward where we see the trend globally. But the government's position remains the same. Let's take Rashad Roll from the Tribune.
Okay, yes. The government is going to allow the state of emergency to end next month, and that should come along with the end of the provision in the emergency orders that does not mandate or that suspends the requirement for employers to provide severance packages to staff who have not been working. Is it the view of the Davis administration that you can suspend that provision of the Employment Act through ordinary legislation? And does the administration plan to continue suspending that provision? And if not, does the administration believe employers will be in the position by the end of the year or early next year to start providing redundancy packages to these workers?
First of all, as you know, we've spoken about it several times. We're seeking to replace emergency orders with key legislation that we believe will be able to govern this pandemic effectively. For more reasons than one, the emergency orders, I think, did a lot of harm more than good because of what it did. We believe that it was inefficient, that persons who were making decisions, it was narrowed down to a single decision rather than collective decisioning, and it wasn't across the board, right? It was selective. We believe legislation will be able to ensure that it's done across the board and that things are in place so that people understand what the requirements are. Now, as for what you spoke about with businesses, it's important to know we stand behind the law. As a government, we stand behind the laws that are on the books. Now, that's challenging for many businesses, particularly during these economic times, to say, okay, well, you have to follow the law and pay out, and if you're going to disengage with somebody. That's why we seek to work with businesses. One of the things I said earlier, our mandate is to have open dialogue. And we're going to talk to businesses. We're going to see where they're at. We're going to talk to them about how feasible is this. Because sometimes, if you recognize that if I have to pay out a package, it might be in the best interest of the company to just retain the employer, the employment of the employee. And if we can do that, that's a win for Bahamian people. But it requires talking to them. But we stand by the law. And I think what will happen is the discussions will generate and will guide the next move for these businesses and these companies. The law requires certain things, and we've done it. I'll give you an example. Prime Minister Davis recently met with a major employer, and one of the things he said to them that if you have to move to this stage, I expect you to follow the law in settling payouts. And that was his position. And I think we all smiled around the table because we recognize that he's come into office to follow what's right for the Bahamian people and the law. But it requires, Rashad, dialogue. And we're going to have that dialogue with businesses.
Yeah, the Attorney General told us that he would have a conversation with the Prime Minister about whether his office will proceed to the Privy Council and challenge that landmark citizenship ruling. The Prime Minister has already gone on the record saying he thinks that ruling was sound. and holds up. And of course, it was the current National Security Minister who secured the victory in the first place. So what is the Prime Minister's position on whether the Attorney General office should still continue to try and get this ruling overturned?
Sure. The Davis administration understands that this is indeed a matter of great national interest, Rashad, and the highest court should determine its outcome, and we're prepared to stand behind allowing the highest courts to do that. Okay? Let's go to Jasper Ward, Nassau Guardian. Jasper.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon. You noted that some of the priorities for the Davis administration is the decrease in value-added tax 10% and the increase of pensions. Can you say how this will be funded, given the current financial situation of the country?
It's currently been determined. The Prime Minister is going to meet with those involved, his cabinet colleagues, of course. He will engage at all levels the persons who are needed to determine exactly how to fund this. When he brings the legislation to Parliament, he will speak toward that and how he expects to roll it out. So we'll wait and allow him to do just that. But he is talking to the players because that's important. How are we going to fund this, given the circumstances in the economy and given the means to roll back certain things? And there are some pretty good strategies that Prime Minister Davis believes he has and he will implement in this regard. And he will be announcing it when he lays the legislation on the table.
Another question relates to that VAT reduction. Will the government release evidence or any results or assessments on what the loss of revenue is and how the VAT revenue will be replaced?
Given the fact that we want to be transparent, if it's important, we release it.
Any timeline on when we could see?
Obviously, this is one of the legislations that go into Parliament first, right? And so there are some assessments that have to be given. I don't want to hold you to a time frame, but I'll tell you, I'll get back to you once we recognize when it's ready. We'll be able to put a time frame in it for you and get it to you.
And finally, when can we expect to see some legislation or draft or anything pushed out for the establishment of the cannabis industry?
I'm glad you asked. Obviously, you know, our first priority is being able to stabilize the economy, dealing with COVID-19. We're focusing on that first. You'd have heard the speech from the throne, which did speak to that. There's no time frame on it. It will be on the agenda, but we've not set a time frame on it until we are able to deal with these pressing matters first. All right? Thank you, Jasper. Let's talk to Chester Robarts, Nassau Guardian Business. Hey, Chester.
Hi, thank you. There are several projects that the government has under review right now. I don't know if there are any more that maybe you can speak to that are under review, and what the government is going to do about timelines for these reviews, given that there are some important things hanging in the balance, like the Grand Bahama Airport for the PPP airport project.
Yeah, it's keeping us busy, just as you can imagine. You can imagine when you are dealing with timelines, the worst thing for an administration to do is have potential investors just waiting and not hearing anything. And that's why we've been extremely busy, because we're trying to juggle and still do this. We have no time frames on it, but we're trying to work within the confines with these investors. A lot of times when you're reviewing projects, you have to go back to investors and get further clarification. And so that's why that dialogue is taking place, to try and find out more information. No timeline set on it, but we are mindful that investments are important to the Bahamas. We want to make sure that when we move ahead with them, they're sound, they're correct, and they're in the benefit of the Bahamian people. So while there's been no specific time frame to it, we are working through it. We do have our people looking at these, reviewing them, talking to people, and it's not in an intention to cancel. It's an intention to see if it's in the best interest and how do we move forward. So you can't put a timeline to that, but we are cognizant that we are dealing with investors and we are treating them with that professional courtesy to make sure it's in a timely manner.
That question was, besides the Prospect Ridge,
Are there other things that we're reviewing? Not particularly. Those are the main ones right now. We're going to have a conversation with the Minister responsible for investments to see if there are additional ones that are on the table, but those are the main ones that we can speak to right now. All right. Thank you, Chester. Sure.
If you review of the economy and the economics and the financials, is there anything that's come up that you can speak to at all?
Prime Minister has not disclosed that as yet. He's looking at things you would have seen in the media. He's interviewed and talked about it. He's called the state of the economy, finances actually, dismal. And that's because we're looking and seeing that, for example, revenues in some cases were overstated or understated. Other cases, expenditures were overstated or understated. And I guess due to the political season, that's what was happening. So what he's getting now is a proper assessment from our financial experts as to what are the actual numbers. And do we have room to play around with movement here? Or is it pretty much, no, you can't touch this, but maybe you can touch that? So he's been busy getting the assessment. As a Minister of Finance, you can imagine that's priority for him. And so he's been meeting with all the relevant authorities and leaders in the various departments to get a clearer understanding of what it is. But he was quite clear when he said it's dismal because a lot of things just simply were not accurate. And so it's now trying to see where we could make movement. And that's why he proposed bringing a budget to Parliament that would be redistributed. Because once you get the figures now, you know what you're really dealing with. You can kind of plan better and decide, okay, let's do this now versus doing this later. And that's what you should expect to see in Parliament real soon. All right, thanks, Chester. Eyewitness News. Hey, Eyewitness News. Francesca Brown.
Very funny.
One of the key points that you said the Davis administration is focusing on is the hospital, and I guess doing an assessment, figuring out what needs to be done. But even before COVID-19, we did talk about there have been major issues at the hospital. One of them is the maternity ward. We've done story after story after story about babies and mothers passing away in the hospital and have had no official word from the previous administration or the PHA about whether there was going to be an investigation or anything. We did another story. There are like 18,000 signatures with mothers talking about what their stories were, the horror stories in the maternity ward, and there's a protest that's planned for Saturday. Is this something that the Davis administration is going to look into, investigate, or even address to bring some sort of relief to all of these mothers that are going to the hospital?
Yes, that in short end is yes. The Minister of Health, Dr. Darville, has been very concerned, extremely concerned about what he has seen. Talking to him personally, he said to me, Clint, you can't imagine the state of what we've seen. What that means now is going back to saying I'm going to address the healthcare sector, which is one of the things that he's doing while he's fighting COVID and leading the COVID fight. He has to now determine, based on what we've seen, which is obviously worse than what we imagined, what is priority right now. There are some things that we thought we may have had time to address. You don't have that kind of time anymore. I perhaps feel with you, the maternity ward may be one of those. Dr. Darville is going to be speaking to the country this weekend. He's going to not only address COVID, but we will actually ask him to address some of the other things he's seen as well, so that we're aware of what the challenges are and what has to be prioritized. And he's spoken to that. He's very concerned about the state of affairs in some of our institutions, and that's why he believes that we have to address those immediately, simultaneously, while we're fighting COVID. Because in order to be able to fight COVID, you've got to shore up the facilities people have to come to. And he has a plan for that. In fact, we did get a question from one of the reporters in Freeport News, and I wanted to be able to tie it in with what they said as far as the facilities. And what we're doing is, because people always question and say, well, how are you going to find money to fund all of this? How are you going to pay for all of this when the government doesn't have it? Well, that's why you use what's available to you. And it's called public-private partnership. Now, that's not just a cliche. When you talk about 3 Ps, that's not just something you say, oh, we're going to, have somebody else pay for it. There are actually private investors and companies that are interested in helping the Bahamas rebuild its healthcare sector, including hospitals in Grand Bahama and New Providence. And so what we are doing now is putting in place a framework and the structure so that when we sit to the table and talk to these investors, it is a win-win for all involved, particularly the Bahamian people. That's at the top of the drawing board, particularly for Grand Bahama and the Ram Memorial Hospital. And then, of course, you've heard the government talk about the Princess Margaret Hospital, and then you've heard the naysayers say, well, how are you going to do it? It's going to cost you millions of dollars. There are people who are seriously interested in partnering with government to do this. And so we're serious about improving healthcare. And we're not just saying it, but watch us do it. Sloan, was I able to satisfy your question earlier? You do, don't you? Go ahead, Sloan.
Are you able to speak to what the final cost was for the government to host the Open of Parliament and other official events at Bahama?
We're still waiting on it. That's been a question everybody in front of me has been asking, and I've been fighting to get those answers. They're still working through tallying and getting information and figures to you, and so we're still waiting on that. And so I don't want to give you a figure because we don't have one yet. It was planned by other entities in the government, and so we're waiting for them to pass that information on to us. Okay. Kyle Joaquin, our news.
All right. I have two questions for yourself and one for the minister, if she doesn't mind. Mr. Watson, you made the news about a week ago. Any update on the full implementation of your plan for the press? Any changes to the draft document that was leaked? And what do you think about the response from members of the media, now your former colleagues?
Sure. First of all, I'm able to say right off the top, I'm very grateful for the support of the media. By and large, when we presented the proposal for input, it was unanimously accepted by media houses throughout the length and breadth, and we're happy for the support that we've gotten. There's been some pushback, one particular entity, of course, but I believe that in anything, I never look for the conflict. I look for the solution. The solution is explaining to people what we're doing. What the guidelines seek to do is provide greater access for the media, not restrict it. One of the things when I sat as a journalist and hosted shows that I complained about was having access to people in government to be able to get information. It was the premise why I took this job, because I wanted to make a difference for my colleagues so that people wouldn't have to go through this again. These guidelines are designed to provide opportunities. This press briefing is just one example of that, to be able to take your questions and to be able to provide answers for you. We're getting ready to do the same with a cabinet briefing, so that you're able to have ministers come to you rather than you standing outside trying to back into them. We're able to do it in a more structured way. We also said to people, if you want us to book your interviews for you for cabinet ministers, feel free. I know sometimes it's very difficult to reach ministers by phone. We'll take that burden from you and we'll reach them for you and set it up. Also, when we do interviews with ministers or the prime minister at events, we want to be able to make sure it's structured in a proper way, but we won't restrict you from it. We just simply said, if you need questions that you need answered to, let us know in advance so we can get the answers for you so that you can have a better developed story. All of these are things that we're doing to help you. Why? Because I understand what it is when you're trying to get a story and you want to get a good soundbite and it's weak. So we're trying to find ways to be able to strengthen what reporters are able to put out to the public and get our message out. We need you to do this. We're not trying to restrict you. We want to partner with you to make this happen. I am pleased to report that since we've been doing this, it's been happening. A lot of people are saying, well, when is it about to start? It's been happening. My colleagues, all of you, perhaps have taken advantage already of reaching out to me to get information, to get responses, to get statements, to book interviews. It's been working. It continues to work, but it does not limit you from trying to make your own bookings, make your own calls, and get your own interviews. You're welcome to continue doing that. We're providing for you an added opportunity to assist you. Same thing on interviews with cabinet ministers or prime minister. Since I've been at this office, they can tell you at any event that they're to and they've asked for an interview, they've gotten it. We've not said no. Doesn't mean that sometimes we won't be able to do it, but I'm happy to say so far we've been able to facilitate all of the interviews. And I don't think anyone can complain about it. So it's working. I always tell people, judge it and prove it based on the people it was designed to empower. And that's you. And if you're comfortable and you're happy that you're getting access and getting information, then we've done our job.
All right. Next question for yourself. The office of the spouse. We know this was an office previously criticized by the wife of the prime minister, who now happens to hold that office and recently had a photo up. Any word from her on why she's decided to accept the role and now finds it important?
Yes, I talked to the First Lady last night because I wanted to find out what is it that you want to do. And she talked about being able to want to work on gender-based issues, working with women, young women, helping to discover purpose, helping them to be able to execute mandates and have a greater voice and participation in the country. That's something that's dear to her. Now, here's what happens, and I believe it's important to say. A lot of the comments that they've attributed to Mrs. Davis, obviously Mrs. Davis made when she had just seen this office formed. So the question was, what is the purpose of this office? When you have the opportunity to see what the office does and see what it's doing around the region, because there are spouses around the region who have all joined arms and said, let's make sure these offices are actually in place, it serves a purpose. Mrs. Davis has been very active and very busy before this office doing this kind of work. So this office really offers support to what has been established. She's been advised by the technical experts at Foreign Affairs that she should keep the office, and after talking with them in that courtesy call and hearing the advantages that can come out of that office and fulfillment, she decided, okay, well, let's go ahead with it. But it was based on the advice of the technical experts at Foreign Affairs who said, we believe it's a good thing, it's happening, it's working well around the region, we think that you should utilize it. And it just goes to show that sometimes when you're not sure of something, or you may have a certain perception, when you get advice, you take the advice and you recognize how you can maximize it. And that's what she has done. And she's looking forward to being able to be even more effective using the office. It's not a paid job. There are finances allocated to it for the operation of the office, but she doesn't get paid to do it. But she's happy to work through it and to get some initiatives done.
Thank you. Just one question, a bit of clarification.
Oh, for Minister?
For the Minister, if I can. Minister, since your statement on there being no plan for the prospect development, we've got a reaction on social media. And one person posted a photo of Dr. Minnis holding a concept sketch plan for the development. Were you made privy to see this sketch, or what do you think this was?
A sketch. That's probably what it was. That's what it's called. But there's a requirement to have a master plan and proper renderings that needs to come forward that actually shows you how you will utilize the land, which is designated for the Prospect Ridge project. And that's the plan I will be working from, not a sketch.
Are you comfortable with this?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, colleagues, so it's past your 12 o'clock. I'm sure most of you have lunchtime to go to. So thank you for being a part of the first press briefing. We are here for you. Please feel free to contact. Our team is in the back. Shanae, listen, I'm not going to get to calling names. Listen, the women you see in the black and white, they form our communications unit. They're here for you. If you have any questions, any comments, anything you need referred to, please feel free to reach out to us. We're here for you. Thank you for being a part of this first press. We look forward to forming a great partnership with you. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you.